Hello, welcome back. Today we are talking about visa starter packs for the EU. So, because we all need a visa, we can't just turn up in a country anymore. And if any of you already have a European passport, you're extremely lucky and don't take that for granted. So, student visas are a great way to start, as I've spoken about in master's programs. If you do one where in a country where it doesn't cost you too much money, you also get a student visa, and that makes a lot of things really easy. It kind of simplifies the situation a lot for you. It does, however, depend on which country you're studying in. So if you're studying in Germany at the moment, this may change, but at the moment you get a year and a half after you finish studying for Arbeitssuchen, to look for work, which is incredible. That's pretty much as much time as you need to find work as an opera singer. You can't just finish uni and go straight into a young artist program or straight into an opera house. Some people do, of course, and they're very lucky, but it's much more typical that you'll spend a lot of time doing lots of auditions. However, there are other countries that are not as generous. For example, in the Nordic countries, I don't think there's much time at all. I know that in Switzerland right now, basically, if you finish your degree on the 1st of September, you need to be out of the country by the 2nd of September. So it's in Switzerland, unless you have a job, of course, and you can change your visa to a working visa. So some countries are very, very strict about that. So just keep that in mind and make sure you research all of these things before you make your decision about where you're going to go, because visas also cost money and they cost time and they're very stressful to sort out. So the other options, of course, are relationship visas. Obviously, you should marry someone if you love them. You shouldn't really marry them for a visa, but I mean, also, no shade. I get it. And I mean, that's typically the most stable way to get a visa. That's why a lot of refugees in Germany spend all day asking people out. 100 girls a day, if they can. They get numbers and they get married. And I mean, if you were fleeing a war-torn country, maybe you'd do that too. I wouldn't know. I'm fortunate enough to not have had to decide to do that or not. But if you are in a relationship with a European, it is a lot easier. So that is my situation. I got to marry the man I love, and he is Australian like me, but he also holds an Austrian passport. So about 5 years into our relationship, we got married, and then I was married to a European, and shortly after that, we moved from Germany to Belgium. And because I arrived in Belgium married to a European person, I got a 5-year residency permit for Belgium. So I'm a full resident of Belgium. It's essentially a passport. I have all of the same rights as anyone else. I can't vote, which is fine. But everything else I have access to. So I'm extremely lucky, and I do not take that for granted at all. The other thing to think about is also, if you're looking to stay long term or you would like to have a passport pathway, which countries offer that? So we are living in a time where a lot of right-wing politicians are getting elected left, right, and centre, and typically they don't like to allow immigration. So just keep that in mind. At the time that I'm talking to you now, it's the end of 2024 and things are still relatively flexible. So I personally am on a passport pathway for Belgium. I can apply for my passport, I think, in May 2026 or maybe 6 months after that. Because that's about 5 years after I received my residence card, permanent residence card. So I will apply for that passport also because it allows me to keep my Australian passport at the same time, which for me is extremely important. I do have a very good mentor of mine, a very special person, came from a country in Africa and gave up that passport to get an American passport at some point in their life, for example. So you will have to think about whether or not you have to give up your existing nationality to get a passport as well. Some people don't mind doing that. Some people do. For me, staying an Australian citizen is hugely important, but that's, of course, not everybody's story. And also at the moment in Germany, I think it's after 3 years of working, and there are certain conditions that I don't know about, but you can definitely Google them. You can get a passport and keep your existing nationality as well. So whether or not that stays, depending on who gets elected in the next election, remains to be seen. So yeah, but relationship visas are the most secure. But you also have to, if you're not married, you have to sort of prove that you live with the person and tralala. There are some places where they have very strict rules about that, though. So make sure that you do a lot of research and do marry for love. Definitely marry for love. I would, as someone who did marry for love, I would really recommend it. The next visa that you can get is the working visa. So if you finish your degree, or not even finish your degree, you start working somewhere, you have a full-time job, you get a visa. They'll help you sponsor it. Some countries it's very expensive, like in the UK, they typically won't sponsor it for you. At the moment, I was looking into this recently because we were looking for English language opportunities, and there was some interesting work in the UK. And as an Australian with British heritage, I have quite an easy visa situation there as well. But because I didn't already have the visa, I could not apply for any jobs in the UK. And so they all said you have to already have a visa, but that's a £5,000, financial outlay for me, which is, not a financial possibility for me at all. And obviously staying in the EU is a much better financial choice for myself and my husband. And also just working wise. I don't know that the UK is having a great time at the moment with opera, and I really hope that changes. But yes, that what my colleagues on that side of the pond tell me, that's the way that's going at the moment. But yes, basically if you get a working visa, essentially you will be able to, if you get a job, you can get a visa. It just depends on whether the company you're working for is going to pay for it, or if you're going to pay for it. So just be aware of that and make sure you've got the budget up your sleeve. So yes, I will say it's not fair because we can't help where we're born. But it is the way it is. It is the world that we live in, and you have to make your way forward as best as you can. I did want to touch on a couple of other points as well. The importance of language skills in a new country is very, very high. If you're in a German-speaking country, you should work on your German. If you're in a French-speaking country, you should work on your French. If you're in a Dutch or Flemish-speaking country, you should work on your Dutch or your Flemish or your Spanish or whatever. There's a lot of inherent racism, and you're going to have a much easier time getting the visa that you want if you can speak at least some of the language of the country where you're applying for your visa. I'm not saying you need to have perfect philosophical level Spanish, for example, but if you can sit there and say, this is what I need, this is what the research I've done, this is what I'm hoping to achieve, etc., in the language of the person that you are asking at the foreigner's office, they're going to be so much nicer to you, and they're going to treat you much better, and your life is going to get a lot easier. So I know language learning is hard, but you have to do it. Also, it's super important. If you want to be an opera singer, if you're taking it seriously, you have to have very good German, very good Italian, and very good French at a minimum. Okay? And I'd really recommend watching Netflix, actually, to practice your languages. It is extremely helpful. Immigrating to a new country is getting harder and harder, as I discussed before, with politicians, and immigration it's just getting harder. So try and get over to where you want to study, where you want to live, where you want to work as soon as you can, and you're never going to feel ready. You're never going to feel ready, and it's going to be really hard, but then it's going to be glorious, and you're going to feel really pleased that you did it. So do it, okay? And yes, just one last point. Each country has different requirements and varying levels of generosity. So do keep that in mind with your application. So that's calling back to what I was talking about with some visas letting you stay for ages to look for work, some not. So just make sure that you research all of those things. And yeah, happy planning, happy budgeting. See you in the next one.